This week, on A Nice Cup of Histortea, we cover one of the pivotal figures in an historic event that experienced a centenary last year, though this person is far, far older than that. We wanted to cover it during the centenary year, however, as we explained in the Histortea Awards, life kind of got in the way and time whizzed by. We are taking you back to the late Bronze Age, but to a civilization that was not matched for centuries after its fall. We're off to Egypt.
Yeah.
To the reign of the boy king, Tutankhamun.
And in this week's Ridiculous Death, we discuss the dangers of poking around in the past.
So let's fire up the time machine, don your coal and finest wig, and don't forget the sun cream. And let's get historical. The first thing to clarify is the name.
Yeah.
Names have always had meaning, though in the modern world not every culture pays full attention to that. But they did in ancient Egypt. We will refer to today's subject as Tutankhamun, or Tut, as that is how he's most commonly known today. You could also see him referred to as Tutankhamen, Tutankhamon, or
You're messing up a word.
Tutankhaten. Yeah, my brain was just like, you do not want to say this. Tutankhaten, which was his original name.
The history and the mythology is as complex as it was beautiful in ancient Egypt, and we won't expand on it here, or we'll be here all day. A very brief note to burn for you. It was common practice to intermarry in ancient Egyptian royalty to keep the bloodline pure. Think Targaryen on Game of Thrones and you'll get it, or Lannister really.
The second thing to note is that the pharaohs of Egypt were believed to be the living incarnation of the god Horus, son of Isis and Osiris, who avenged the murder of his father, the king of the underworld, by his uncle, the chaos god Seth. There is much more to it than that, trust us, but that's it in a nutshell. Pharaoh equals living god.
Tutankhamun ascended the throne during a turbulent religious time. His father Akhenaten had led what we now call the Amarna Revolution, where he tried to turn a lot of what was known in Egypt on its head and lead people from a polytheistic heathenism to the light of the true god, the Aten. His original name was Imhotep IV, but following his religious epiphany, he changed it to Akhenaten, meaning beneficial to Aten.
Yeah, it's literally in his name.
Can we just appreciate all the words I just said?
You did. You did well. You did
it's
well.
Because I've watched a lot of The Mummy. I can say Imhotep.
I mean, it's Amenhotep.
Hey,
but you got the Hotep. The Hotep was beautiful. It was
Thank
beautiful.
you.
I'm very proud of the fact that you said the words polytheistic heathenism without even blinking.
This is a good day.
When his son was born, he was named the living image of Aten, or Tutankhaten. Akhenaten's reforms were not popular, and after his death things were quickly switched back, and then his name was scrubbed, in some cases literally, from many of the historical records. The young prince's name was changed to be the living image of Amun, meaning Amun-Ra, the head of the Egyptian pantheon, or Tutankhamun.
Yeah, that's cool.
There's some controversy around whether it was actually the living image of Amun, or if that was a bit blasphemous and it was more like life is good under Amun.
Okay.
But it could be both.
Just a note here, quite a big note I would say. We don't actually know who Tut's mother was. There has been genetic testing, not just generic. We did some random testing on some woman for no reason.
Yeah, just pick one.
There has been some genetic testing carried out on an unknown mummy found in a side chamber in the tomb, and it has been proved to be his mother and the daughter of Pharaoh Imhotep III and Queen Tia, who were also the parents of Akhenaten. So King Tut's mother was also his aunt, and his father was also his uncle. Keeping up?
No.
It's only going to get worse.
In around 1336 BCE, or BC, after 17 years on the throne, Akhenaten died and his son ascended to the crown, aged only 9. He changed his name and even took on an additional regnal name. Now, they had about 5 different names, meaning different things, and they would all have a regnal name. Now, our monarchs today also take on a regnal name. Mm-hmm. We're lucky that I can't believe I'm going to say this, our last 2 have kept their actual names as regnal names, so Elizabeth II, Charles III. But sometimes you could change your name. And Tutankhamun's regnal name was Nebkepureri.
Of course.
Yeah.
Why pick a simple one?
I'm not 100% certain what that means, but we will still refer to him as Tutankhamun or Tut.
So, you know when I spoke about the fact that his mum, dad was his aunt, uncle?
Mm-hmm.
He married his half-sister.
You may know this name from the mummy, because they've changed it. Tutankhamun.
Oh! I would not have been able to say that. But yeah. So that's his half-sister. And she was the daughter of Akhenaten and the legendary beauty, Queen Nefertiti. Sadly, it is not believed that any children survived from this union. 2 unnamed mummified fetuses have been found in Tut's tomb, believed to have been their stillborn daughters.
Which is sad, really.
It is really sad, but also there's reasons brothers and sisters shouldn't have children.
We'll come back to that later. We'll kind of expand on that a little bit.
Fabulous.
So that's kind of like his early life, a little bit of facts about him and about his lineage. Let's talk about his reign.
Mm-hmm.
So during his reign, Tut was supported by 2 advisors or viziers. Because of the size of Egypt, 2 were required. One to cover Upper Egypt, which is the area south of the Nile Delta and the 30th parallel, and one to cover Lower Egypt, which is the area covering the Nile Delta up to the Mediterranean Sea. So, like, Upper Egypt is the southern part, Lower Egypt is the northern part.
That makes no sense.
The Coptic name for Lower Egypt was Sakhet, which means the northern part, and the upper was Tashama, or the reedlands, because there's lots of reeds. It was believed the Romans and the Greeks were the ones who referred to them as lower and upper, just because of the geography of the area. So, like, upper is a little bit higher and lower is a little bit actually lower down, even though it's in the north, geographically, if you look at it on a map, the contour lines are lower. Because it's in the Nile Delta, so it's more of a flat land.
Like Norfolk compared to everywhere else.
Yeah, basically. So Norfolk would be like lower Egypt, but it would be north.
Because it's so flat.
Yeah,
Okay,
but like Kent has some cliffs and some mountains, but that would be called upper because it's higher.
Even though it's
south.
southern to me.
Yeah.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Actually,
it's just a bit confusing with the names. That's all.
it is. But you've just made that not confusing. Well done, Carrie.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Upper Egypt was overseen by Vizier Uzamonatu.
Yeah.
It is believed, though, not yet confirmed by evidence, that another vizier was called A, who also went by the little doer of Mat, meaning a priest of the goddess relating to justice. Mat.
Yeah, so he was a priest, but also a vizier. So it's kind of, we're not entirely sure if he was an advisor because he was a priest, or like a religious advisor, or if he was a vizier who happened to be a priest. It's all a little bit...
Jafar was a royal vizier.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, it's that kind of role. It was an official role. Vizier is just the word that we use for it, it's not their word.
Oh, okay.
So as well as advising the king, these viziers were responsible for making sure that the kingdom ran smoothly. Conflicts were dealt with in whatever way worked best, and their epithets and monuments that venerated their pharaoh were erected to venerate him as a living god. Are you going to laugh at the word erected?
I was trying not to. At the start of his reign, King Tut would be crowned using the
Shent. Or Pashent.
A special crown that combined the white Hijit crown of Upper Egypt with the red Deshret crown of Lower Egypt. He would then take counsel with the great god Amun, who would give him advice and prophecy about his reign.
So basically, like, they took the crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt, which were originally 2 separate entities, and combined them under the pharaoh. So as you combined Egypt into one, they literally combined the crown.
Oh, that's cool.
So we know that the crown of the pharaoh of Egypt was red and white.
That's really cool.
And as soon as he was crowned, he's like, I'm just going to go chat to Amun, like my godly grandpa, and it's all going to be good, and I'm going to find out what he wants me to do laters.
BRB.
Yep. He would then give endowments, so donations and gifts, to cults of priests, like cults of Amun and Ptah, commissioning fine statues and processional monuments from the best quality stone, wood and metals, including gold. So not only were they very, very up on the fact that he was a living god, it's also all about legacy and how they're going to live forever. Even if their body doesn't, the soul will as the next pharaoh. So each incarnation has to do something major to be remembered. That's why we've got all these massive, impressive monuments.
I mean, it's a really cool idea, but we can't forget that this dude was 9 years old when he came into power.
Yeah, he's 9 years old. He's like, yo, I've got to go chat to a god.
He undid the work of his father by restoring the positions of the priests and other religious attendants, and he also issued a decree granting them security and stability ongoing, basically ensuring that his descendants would not try and cause religious upheaval again.
Yeah, so basically he's saying, Dad was wrong, really sorry guys, have everything back.
This won't happen again.
We're good to go. Yeah. It wasn't until the second year of his reign.
Right, so he did all of that at 9 years old.
This was like pretty much within the first year of his reign, so yeah, between 9 and 10. I mean, did he or did his viziers?
He did.
He did.
He's cool.
Even if it was his viziers, he did it.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't until the second year of his reign that he and his wife changed their names, swapping out Arten for Armen.
He was married at 9 as well.
Oh yeah, you would have been married pretty much straight away.
That's okay.
He needs to secure his dynasty. Whether he, did the do, she was also older than him. She was his older sister.
Ugh.
Yeah. So they swapped out Arten for Armen. So he was no longer Tutankhamun, he was Tutankhamun. And they moved the capital of the kingdom from Akhetaten, which was where Akhenaten moved it. Akhenaten moved it to Akhetaten. Yep.
Yeah.
To Thebes, removing the mummified body of his father and reburying him in the concentrated burial area for pharaohs and influential figures that you may have heard of, the Valley of the Kings.
That's cool. He worked to rebuild the shrines at Karnak and Luxor, as well as rebuilding a number of other temples and shrines across Egypt that his father had torn down. He had inherited a kingdom with a weak economy thanks to his father, and diplomatic relations with neighbouring states were severely weakened. So he set about trying to rebuild those two.
To put this in a more modern context, think of what he did. Think of what happened with Charles II coming back after Oliver Cromwell. So Oliver Cromwell changed the religion to Puritan and Protestant, and so many things were outlawed, and you had to do this, and this was wrong and that was wrong, and churches were completely stripped out. And Charles II came back and just was like, nah, brought it all back.
Yeah.
That's what Tutankhamun pretty much did. That kind of thing. Gifts found from various other nations in his tomb attest to his success in rebuilding relationships with people such as the Mitanni, which is a nation from the region of modern-day Syria. He also had relations that weren't so successful with the Nubians and Asiatic peoples, and his battles with them are actually recorded on the walls of a temple in Thebes, which was dedicated to his memory after he passed. It's called a funerary temple.
There is some debate amongst historians, however, as to whether Tut actively took part in these battles, owing to his youth, but also the fact that he had a physical disability, and we'll come back to that in a minute.
His age was taken into account with possible advisors who not only helped with battle and foreign policy, but also helped to calm the allegedly hot-headed king.
Many of the construction and restoration projects that Tut started were left unfinished at the time of his death, and a number of these were usurped by his successors or dismantled to use in their own monuments.
Yeah, we know for a fact that who was his advisor and also his successor, and his son, I'm not entirely, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, I want to say Hemteheb, it was something similar, they usurped a lot of his stuff. They basically, as soon as Tutankhamun was dead, they took apart some of his monuments and built their own using his stuff.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it was not cool. So, health and death. Because his reign wasn't long. He ascended the throne at 9, died at 19.
10 years.
10 years wasn't bad. I mean, his dad only got 17. But it wasn't great. He was the offspring of many decades of interbreeding, and that takes its toll on the physical and mental health of descendants. I mean, just look at the Habsburgs and that chin. Oh.
He wasn't a hefty guy, estimated at just 5 feet 6 inches tall, with an overbite, a narrow waist and rounded hips. Whilst we can't say for sure all of the conditions that he had, there were a few suggestions and some that have been found later through a CAT scan, and here are some of them, and with a loose idea of kind of what they are.
Do you want me to say the Latin words and you'll give the thing?
Yeah. Dude, really?
I just wanted to double check. Okay, so the first one is gynecomastia.
Which is a hormone imbalance in males leading to the growth of breast tissue.
That one is estimated, judging from his body shape and like the look of some of the statues of him. Like
So
the
he
full body
may have
statues.
had boobs.
He may have had boobs, yes.
Okay.
Marfan syndrome.
A genetic disorder affecting the cognitive tissue leading to elongated limbs.
Yeah, so if you look at statues of him, his arms are slightly longer and his legs are slightly longer than they potentially should be. That could be that. It could also be really crap statue makers.
It could.
Wilson-Turner X-linked intellectual disability syndrome.
Which is a genetically linked intellectual disability. Why is that the one I struggle
I
with?
don't know. It's kind of like...
Global development delay.
Along similar lines. Adiposogenital dystrophy.
A disease associated with defects in the
Hypothalamus.
leading to things like obesity, growth delays, and issues with vision, amongst other concerns.
So if he had things like that with growth delays, obesity, elongated limbs, so he'd probably have a small torso, elongated limbs, and potential for excess male breast tissue, and lean towards obesity if he'd gotten older. Temporal lobe epilepsy.
It's quite common, I guess, with the inbreeding.
Craniosynostosis syndrome.
Premature fusing of the cranial bones in infancy leading to unusual skull shapes.
Which, if you look at his mummy, his skull does look a little bit different. Cleft hard palate.
Mild scoliosis.
Flat right foot with hypophalangism.
Absence of one or more phalange bones in the foot. Which is very... When you think of, like, inbreeding, they always joke and say that it's extra bones or less limbs.
Yeah.
That's like a big thing. So I kind of expected there to be something like that.
Yep. This one's quite... For me, this is... he had a clubbed left foot.
Aww.
The reason that's resounding for me is I have clubbed feet. I have it in both feet.
Yeah, your tip wasn't as cool as you.
Well, no, but I actually did a dissertation for my master's based on like club feet being shown in mythology and history, and I did mention that it was estimated that he had a club left foot because of some of his sandals and the way they were worn and the way they were slightly mended. Koehler disease 2.
Which is bone necrosis of the metatarsal, so his fingers, bones, and his feet, toes.
Yeah.
Words started to basically decompose.
There are a number of other proposed conditions, but even nowadays that would make life incredibly difficult.
Oh my god, he had so many.
Yeah, obviously because we don't have any surviving or many surviving records, and they wouldn't record that there was something wrong with the pharaoh. They wouldn't dare imagine it. We can only go on what bits we can get from his mummy, from scans, so it's very limited. So these are all kind of... It's mostly guesswork, but it's very educated guesses.
Yeah.
While some aspects of Egyptian medicine were actually impressively accurate with their treatments, it still couldn't have been an easy thing for the boy king to go about his daily life without a great deal of difficulty or pain, and it certainly would have been difficult for him to cut an effectively imposing figure at public functions like a pharaoh should. I mean, if you think of pharaoh, you think of like Yul Brynner.
Yeah.
In the Ten Commandments and things, you expect that kind of imposing, standing pharaoh. You know, you look at him and you know you're in trouble. A young boy with gangly limbs, a cleft palate, overbite, strangely shaped skull. No. Doesn't
conjure that image that we've come to expect.
Yeah, and he certainly wouldn't be able to strut anywhere. He'd kind of hobble.
Yeah. But given all the above, Tut's death at an early age probably shouldn't come as a huge shock. But his cause of death has been the result of a lot of speculation over the years, especially as there are no surviving records pertaining to the event. Was it natural causes, or, like in a lot of Egyptian pharaohs, was it something more sinister?
I mean, it's a top job. If you wanted the top job, you kind of got to clear the person at the top. Mm-hmm. The use of modern medical equipment, such as a CT scan, have certainly shed light on certain things, including a compound fracture, which is where the broken bone pierces the skin, of his left leg. It was considered originally that the fracture could have been caused post-mortem by a recent movement. However, fragments of substances used in embalming were actually found within the fracture, showing that it was present at the time of death as an open wound.
Ouch.
Yeah.
He had a broken leg.
Yep.
Sticking through the box, that hurts.
Yeah.
Historian and Egyptian Minister of Antiquities, Dr.
Zahi Hawass.
I was close.
Legend.
Headed up a team that looked into Tutankhamun. His tomb looked into Tutankhamun, his tomb, and tried to hone in on some of the truth within the tales. That team believes that his death was caused by ongoing concerns by autoimmune deficiencies, diseases such as malaria and the fractured leg. It has also been suggested by historians, Christian Timan and Christian Mayer, that sickle cell anemia might have been a possible affliction and also a contributing factor to Tut's death.
Yeah, so if he had autoimmune issues as well, and things like sickle cell anemia, plus all of his other conditions, and they have found evidence that he potentially repeatedly had malaria. If he had that at the time of his death and all of a sudden got a compound fracture, his body would go into shock. That could have been what killed him. An X-ray taken in 1968 showed dislodged bones within the skull, which led to the popular opinion that Tut was murdered by a bop on the head. And everyone suspected I for it, who was his successor.
Yeah.
This has since been disproved, as indications show that the skull fragments may have actually been as a result of the mummy being moved. So they came loose afterwards.
Yeah.
No other evidence of blunt force trauma to the skull have been found. So when you get blunt force trauma, you get like the radial fractures, don't you? You know more about this than I do.
Yeah.
So there was no evidence of any of that found. It was just dislodged bones.
Yeah, there wouldn't be just... When you hit someone on the head, it isn't just a hole. It's what comes afterwards.
Yeah.
Or think of it like a ripple in the pond.
Mm-hmm.
When you put something down and then it ripples out.
Well, that would make sense because bone is organic material, obviously, so it would have an impact on that organic material. There was some speculation around potential evidence that might have been found of a subdural hematoma on the back of his head. So it's possible that they believed that happened around the time of death, so he basically hit his head. Oh. So if he broke his leg, he fell, hit his head, lights out.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, and that would also explain why there was no blunt force trauma if it happened to the little soft squidgy bit back.
Injuries to the chest cavity, including missing ribs, have been proven to not have been the result of an alleged chariot accident, but instead an unfortunate incident where tomb robbers stole a beaded collar and skull cap that were buried with Tut sometime between 1926, when these items were photographed, and 1968, when the mummy was x-rayed.
Yeah.
So someone stole a rib. Yeah,
so someone stole his chest plate, and because it's like a beaded collar, you know, in typical, you see on the death mask. So you think of Tutankhamun, you think of the death mask, and you know that little like U-shaped necklace. That's the beaded neck plate, and they would actually wear necklaces like that, and very vibrant golds, blues, greens, reds, and that he was actually wearing that, and it was photographed that was over the top of his mummy, but then it vanished, and it's believed that in pulling it off, they actually dislodged one of his ribs. But that led to the rumour that he died in a chariot accident. But if he could barely stand, how could he ride a chariot? Really? So, long story short, how did Tut die? We don't really know.
That annoys me.
Disease and degenerative illnesses mixed with perimortem injury, which means injury at the time of death, seem to be the most likely cause. But, to be honest, we might never actually know for sure unless someone summons his ka, or his soul, from the depths of the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, and asks him. Disclaimer, don't do that. It's not cool. On the one hand, you're disturbing someone's well-earned eternal rest. On the other, you're unleashing a pissed-off spirit of a living god from a culture that absolutely practice magic. Don't do it.
Do not.
No.
Even if the Duat is shown to be really, really cool in Moon Knight.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. Like the field of reeds and everything.
Yeah.
Firstly, you know, you've seen the one in movies.
Yeah.
Don't do it. And secondly, Anubis is the guardian of the underworld. Do you want Anubis coming after you?
No.
Because if you do, you are on your own. I will not know.
So you go, when you die in Egypt, you and you're a pharaoh, you get put in a tomb.
Well, you got to go somewhere.
Yeah. So, right? It was a big deal to be buried in an elaborate tomb, filled with spells and depictions of the gods, and with your great deeds in your life. Burial monuments used to be very visual symbols of power and wealth. For example, pyramids.
Yep.
After a while, though, tombs started to go underground to deter robbers. They were no less extravagant, though.
Tut's tomb, however, was quite small for a pharaoh, and this has led to a lot of speculation that the tomb was meant for someone else, such as his successor Ai, or maybe he died before it could be properly finished.
After observing the customary 70 days after death before interment, Tutankhamun was buried. Evidence shows that his tomb was robbed at least twice shortly after burial, but then, over time, the location of the tomb was lost.
Gradually, as archaeology advanced, more and more tombs were discovered in the Valley of the Kings, but still Tut waited.
In 1907, archaeologist Howard Carter was invited to join an excavation funded by George Herbert, the 5th Earl of Carnarvon, along with Theodore Davis, who had the concessions rights for excavations in the valley at the time. Davis believed they had found all there was to find in the valley, and they started excavating in other places around the Theoban necropolis.
So basically, he'd just given up. He basically said, we can't find anything else here, we've got it all, let's just move away.
Yeah.
Carter didn't give up, however, and he managed to get the rights to keep digging there. And eventually, in November 1922, he found...
a long time after.
It was a little bit. He found Tutankhamun's tomb. The first steps down to the tomb were uncovered on the 4th of November 1922.
Which is when we wanted to record this episode.
Yeah, and we do put up a poster on that day,
yeah.
But life got in the way. But February 1923, the antechamber had been cleared, so we're still within the centenary. And on the 17th of February 1923, at just after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the seal was broken and Tutankhamun was finally found.
Within the tomb was a total of 5,398 items, including a solid gold coffin, thrones, trumpets, sandals, and even fresh linen underwear. I mean, you want, fresh undies in the afterlife.
Yeah, you got to meet Anubis in your best tighty whities.
Innit? It took a total of 10 years for Carter to catalogue everything.
I would have loved that job. It would have driven me mad. Especially if I put something down and miscounted, it would have driven me nuts, but I would have loved it. The artefacts discovered in the tomb have travelled the world, and you think of Tut, you think of his death mask, which is probably the image we're going to use for this podcast. So they are iconic. They have become a part of the global consciousness. When you think of Egypt, you think of mummies, or mummified persons, you think of Tut, you think of the mask.
Yeah. The exhibition is currently back in Egypt in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo and other local institutions. Once the Ground Egyptian Museum in Cairo is opened, the treasures along with a number of other Egyptian artefacts will be permanently housed there, which I think they deserve to be there.
Yeah, it's their history. And as much as I believe in items and artefacts being on loan to other museums around the world...
So people can, have a look who can't get to Egypt.
Yeah, but it's still... Or even, nowadays, consider it, if you're a museum, you could have a technological exhibit. So rather than having it on loan, you could have an exhibit where people can go and read up about it with display boards, and then you can either, being aware of sanitisation here, use VR headsets, where you use virtual reality to walk through, or for people who have vertigo where they couldn't do that, maybe like a cinematic journey through the exhibit. Because the technology, we could totally do that nowadays. And it could also, I don't get why they don't use VR to do, you walk around in museums anyway.
Yeah.
Because there's people that physically cannot get to museums, they cannot leave their house. Why should they be denied it? But that's an entirely different conversation. The Grand Egyptian Museum, as far as I know, it was due to have been opened in November 2022. I don't believe it's quite finished yet, or if it hasn't been opened. However, the museum, the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, they had a lot of the exhibits of the the royal mummies returned there, and it was during COVID. There was a thing called the procession of the pharaohs, and if you get a chance on YouTube, we might see if we can put the link on on Twitter or Facebook or something. The entire procession is televised, and it was a magnificent spectacle. I watched it and I got goosebumps. It's incredible. You have people dressed in initial, as much as we can from pictures and information that we've got from the archaeological record, dressed in original Egyptian clothing.
They're like the white toga thingies that you see all the time.
Yeah, with the eye makeup, with the wigs, with everything, carrying bowls of incense and myrrh
really
and everything,
cool.
doing a full procession from where they were stored to the museum, and the coffins themselves, the sarcophagi, rode in fully automated Egyptian-style chariots with cartouches, which is their names in hieroglyphs on the side, along with their names in English, so that you could read them.
That's really, really respectful. I love that.
And they played music that they gathered from the time using instruments, but with a modern twist, and it was huge. It was so cool. I've only seen clips of the full video. I've yet to watch the full video because it lasted about an hour. But oh my god, I would have lost all of my shit if I'd have been there. I'd have probably cried and made a complete embarrassment of myself, but it would have been worth it.
That would have been really cool.
Yeah, Egypt is definitely on my bucket list. 100%. So, Tutankhamun.
It's a really fascinating story.
Yeah. You'll note we haven't covered too much about what happened after his death. So there was a whole political intrigue with Ai taking over and what happened to his wife Ankhesenamun. I eventually ended up marrying Ankhesenamun. But
she did a Catherine of Aragon.
She did. She was not overly happy about it though.
Oh.
It was not entirely a consensual marriage from what we can gather.
Oh.
It was a political manoeuvre.
Okay.
But yeah, it was not good. And that's kind of what caused a lot of speculation that maybe I had bumped off Tutankhamun. But, I mean, from the sounds of all those medical conditions, it might have been a bit of a mercy. Bless him. He did not sound healthy.
No, that's what you get from all of the inbreeding.
Yep.
Just like a Joffrey.
Oh, God, yeah. No. We might cover Ai and what happened in a later episode maybe one day, because it is interesting and all these characters do deserve their own stories, but for now we were just covering Tutankhamun himself.
You wanted to do that for a while, so I'm glad we got it done for you.
I have, thank you, I appreciate it.
Cool. So ridiculous death time.
Ridiculous death.
This isn't ridiculous death as we usually do ridiculous deaths. This is more to do with Tutankhamun.
Okay.
And his curse.
Ooh.
Yeah, so there's a lot of death
Ooh.
involved, so it is still deathy. It is still kind of ridiculous. But are they freak coincidences? Or is it all because of a curse?
There is no such thing as coincidence.
The universe is very rarely that lazy.
Yeah, exactly.
So now, no mummy's tomb would be complete without a curse, however. Whether it was a series of coincidences, like we said, or genuine supernatural widgy, the curse seemed to come true.
Okay.
The first one was on the 5th of April 1923. The Earl Carnarvon, who we spoke about before, died from pneumonia, fused with streptococcal skin infection. A further 7 people involved in the excavation and who were present at the opening both of the tomb and the sarcophagus died within a few years of discovery. However, Carter himself lived to the ripe old age of 64, dying in 1939 of lymphoma.
Okay. So it got Carnarvon, but it didn't get Carter.
No.
Okay.
But it doesn't just stop at him.
Okay.
Let's
hear about the spooky... I do like... I know we probably shouldn't be in historians, but I do love the folklore side of things and myths and legends.
Yeah.
You might have noticed, possibly. But I do love a good curse.
Yeah.
Curses and prophecies, man.
Okay, so we'll say that one, possible... That's creepy. They open the tomb and any 7 people who were present at the time died within a few years.
Okay.
There was someone called George Gay Gould.
Mm-hmm.
He was a wealthy American financier, and he visited the tomb in 1923, and he fell ill almost immediately after and died a couple of months later. But he was perfectly healthy until that time.
Okay. That's odd.
Yeah, but then in that same year, Prince Ali Kamal Fameh Bey, apologies if I got that wrong, of Egypt, was another visitor to the celebrated tomb, and he was shot dead by Marie Magrinette Lounet, whom he was actually married to 6 months before. Despite her being the only person in the room when Prince Ali was shot 3 times at close range, she was acquitted and went free because she claimed diminished responsibility.
Oh.
Yep. So that was in the 1923.
Mm-hmm.
The next year, in 1924, Sir Archibald Douglas Reed was a radiologist who x-rayed Tutankhamun's mummy, and he died from unknown issues.
Oh. Okay.
Yep.
Did they not think to x-ray him and find out?
I don't know if they did.
Oh.
Later that same year, so we're on 1924, so we've had 6 people in 1923. Oh, not 6, 8 that we spoke about from Carnarvon, and the 7 who were there at the time.
Yeah.
We've had 2 others in 1963, and we've had 1 in 1964.
Okay.
So far. But later, so another one in 1964, we had an archaeologist known as Hugh Evelyn White. He hanged himself. He committed suicide. But he left a note, allegedly written in his own blood, that said, and I quote, "I have succumbed to a curse which forces me to disappear."
Oh.
So he's actually admitting that he's saying there was a curse.
Okay.
Cool. So that's all in 1923 and 1924.
Mm-hmm.
We now skip ahead to 1926.
Okay.
Aaron Ember was another Egyptologist who was close to Carnarvon.
Mm-hmm.
He died in a house fire.
Right.
But he had plenty of time to escape this fire. He did not need to die in it. He ran back into the house when it was engulfed in flames to retrieve a manuscript of a book he was working on, entitled The Egyptian Book of the Dead.
The irony there is not lost on me.
Yeah.
But also, having written a book and knowing how much effort it takes, I would, I understand the desire. I wouldn't do it, but I understand the desire to run back into the burning building to save your manuscript.
Yeah. Then the last person to die before Carter, as we said, in 1939, was the second person to enter the tomb, and it was Carnarvon's secretary, Richard Bethel. If anyone was going to fall prey to a curse, it would be him, but the sinister power of the pharaohs took 7 years to reach him, and he was found suffocated in a private room in a London club.
Suffocated?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Okay.
There are a myriad of lesser victims of the curse, such as Sir Bruce Ingram. He was gifted a mummified hand by Carter to use as a paperweight. The grisly ornament had a bracelet attached with the inscription, "Cursed be he who moves my body." Shortly after he received the present, he was lost when his house burnt to the ground.
I mean, seriously?
Did some of the original team that opened the tomb fall victim to this curse? Were they exposed to an ancient pantheon that had to lay wait for them for thousands of years? Or were they just the victims of comparatively limited understanding of medical science who lived at the time when health and safety were just 2 unrelated words?
The people who died initially on the opening of the tomb, I can kind of understand, because they're basically breaking a seal, something that's been sealed for over 1,000 years.
Yep.
Well, like 2,000-3,000 years at that point, and they didn't know what pathogens were in there,
No.
and it could have been something that their immune systems are not equipped to deal with, and then it's released with a gush of air at pressure.
Yeah.
So, have you seen, I can't believe I'm going to say this, have you seen the second Mummy movie, or Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Mm-hmm.
You know, when they kind of open the box and just whooshes out, that kind of thing. So as soon as they open the seal, the air from outside would have whooshed in, the pathogens would have whooshed out straight into their faces.
I hear you.
But the others...
No, I'm just saying, if that had been the thing, why were the first 2 people that went in, it took them over 7 years to die, and the people behind them are the ones that died straight away? If it had been a pathogen, the first 2 have been the ones that hit the most.
That's
They're
a
the
fair point,
2
actually. That is a fair point.
Carter died of lymphoma.
And also, famously, it's documented, when the seal was broken, Carter looked through the gap to see all the treasures inside. So if there was anything that would have whooshed out and hit him, it would have hit him directly in the face. So, yeah, it's a valid point.
So is there a curse? I definitely think there was. That's too much of a coincidence. 1 person, 2 person, but we're looking at over 10 people that all are connected to opening the tomb or visiting it shortly after it was opened, being sent a gift.
Can I just point out, though, that is the second story. I did not know the Ingram one. That is the second story of a person with the surname Ingram who has fallen foul of a mummy's curse.
That's Carrie's surname, by the way, if you're wondering why it's a deal. Like, we thought it was a big deal.
It's like, oh, okay, this is weird. The other one was they had the lid of a box that held the organs. So the canopic jars were stored in a box, and the lid of this canopic box was somehow passed into the hands of someone called Ingram, and he went on a hunting trip with his friend whose surname was Wilson, who was his best friend, and that's a big deal because M's maternal and his mum's maiden name is Wilson. So Ingram and Wilson went on this hunting trip. It all went horribly wrong, and Ingram was killed.
They haven't been home in a few days.
Smooth.
Thank you.
So yeah, that's the second Ingram. So maybe I shouldn't go to Egypt. Maybe.
Or maybe not.
Or maybe I'll be the one that does it.
So rather than a ridiculous death, it was kind of a ridiculous curse that caused 11, 12 deaths.
Respect the mummified people.
Respect the dead in
Respect
general.
the dead, and just don't take hands off dead people.
I don't want a dead hand as a paperweight. Especially if the bracelet said, "Cursed be he who moved my bones." Yeah. Fuck that for a laugh.
So you want a paperweight? You get one of them nice little cool stone dragon ones or something. Funky. It's alright.
Or the ones that are like resin with a flower in the middle.
Or the one that I've got, which is a sarcophagus with Anubis's head with a tiny little stone mummy inside. That's a paperweight, not an actual one. A little stone one.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's kind of cool actually. But you can take them out, but I don't. You can take them out, but I don't.
Do you know what I just realised?
What?
Changing the subject slightly. This is the first episode of season 4.
Oh yeah.
We haven't said anything about it being the first episode of season 4.
Happy 4th season!
Woo!
Thank you for sticking with us, you wonderful, beautiful, crazy fools.
Yes.
High five. We hope that we...
Thank you.
We hope that we're not as rough and ready as we were at the start. We're also aware that we're not polished diamonds.
We are a diamond in the rough. The rough.
So you thought Aladdin, I thought I'm a diamond in the rough, a shiny piece of coal from Hamilton.
They both
The
work.
power of speech unimpeachable. Yeah.
Stop. They both work.
Yeah, it works. But, so, season 4.
Yeah, we're
done
back
ridiculous
with a bang.
Would you like a random fact?
Oh, I would. Let's do it live, shall we? If you want to see what it looks like when Carrie does these, then head on over to our TikTok, which is at A Cup of Histortea. That's our handle on all of our social media. And you will see the recording of this in real time. So, Carrie. Carrie's random fact.
It's often said, what did the Romans do for us? What did they invent? But what did the Egyptians invent for us? Well, I'll tell you. Paper, pens, locks, keys, and toothpaste. Yeah.
Carrie's random fact.
Yeah. Bet you didn't know that one.
I didn't.
What did the Egyptians do for us? Quite a few things, apparently, including confuse us with hieroglyphs. But we've gone from a language where we use images to communicate to modern day with emojis where we use images to communicate.
Do you think they had like an image like an eggplant?
I don't know. It was like, come over later, we can read. As in, the read, or we can staff. We can staff and bowl.
Staff and bowl.
Yeah, staff and bowl.
And now we have
basket.
An eggplant.
We have an eggplant. Yeah. An eggplant and a peach. Yeah. When are we building that time machine?
On that note, we will go and we will speak with you in a fortnight. Oh, it's our dark cup in a fortnight. Ooh. We're taking it spooky to one of our nominees from the Histortea Awards. So we'll let you think on what that may be.
See you later.
Bye.